Today I would like to talk about offboarding, a paper that was created with my wonderful colleagues, of whom Florin is also here today. So, understanding the offboarding process in companies from an IT security perspective. I would like to start out with yet another set of IT security related incidents, of which we see a lot of every day. And while the reasons for many of these data breaches, for example, are being researched by this great community, for example, the reuse of passwords, this set I brought has something in common that hasn't been researched as much yet. So first, there's a museum that missed out on their lucrative weekend opening times. There is a healthcare provider that exposed data of 1.2 million patients. And there is a cash app that also exposed data of potentially even 8 million users. And what do all of these things have in common? Yes, they were all subject to some sort of IT security related incident related to inadequate offboarding. But, and spoiler alert, we found various reasons for problems in this process, as one participant put it. But when I think about it, there are still lots and lots of accounts that IT doesn't really know anything about. So before we get into the research, I want us to be all on the same page of what even is offboarding. Offboarding is the process that accompanies an employee when they leave or transfer within a company. And the key objectives here are to protect the sensitive data of the organization, to safeguard against cyber threats, and to also ensure the retention of company-owned assets. And as we already saw, there seem to be some problems in this process, and therefore we first wanted to understand, okay, what does the current offboarding process look like in relevant IT security frameworks? Then, of course, we wanted to understand what does the current process look like in the field, so for the organizations we're going to interview, and what are the key challenges faced by the people or stakeholders implementing the offboarding process, especially in regards to IT security. And to understand the offboarding challenges, we reached out to experts. This was done in the time frame of August 2023 to December 24. And to be honest, finding the right people wasn't easy. After all, we had vastly different people and job description that were involved in the interviews, because it could be like a developer that's doing offboarding on the side, or a dedicated chief of information security, or even someone from HR that's involved in the process. However, we managed to connect with the right people by diving into expert communities on LinkedIn and Reddit, and we ultimately conducted 15 in-depth interviews where we did 13 in German and 2 in English. And now I would like to quickly focus on our coding process. We started out with the interviews, and these interviews were audio recorded. We then did transcription using Whisper, and after we did the cleanup, we started with the transcription with an inductive coding approach similar to Words and Colleagues. Here we had 3 different interviewees that coded the same 5 interviews independently. After that, we discussed and merged the codebook, and then the remaining interviews were each coded by at least 2 researchers, and they then discussed the results and differences, and then we stopped when we hit theoretical saturation, and of course we still did the already scheduled interviews, but yeah, so we ended up with a final data set. And now that we are sufficiently motivated and we understood how it's done, I would like us to dive into results. So first I want to look at the frameworks. So we took a look at 3 different frameworks. There was the BSI Grundschutz, the ISO 27001 and 002, and the NIST cybersecurity framework. And as I tried to visualize here, these frameworks were quite scattered throughout different documents. You sometimes saw references to other documents. For example, the BSI Grundschutz references the ISO. Then the frameworks reference other documents of themselves. In general, it was quite hard to even find guidance of offboarding because it was sometimes declared as something else. And also finding really actionable guidance was also a challenge. And when we searched for the offboarding guidelines ourselves, we also found it quite hard to extract the data. But as can be seen in further detail in our paper, we tried to consolidate a list of some of potential offboarding items and also the references for where you can find all of these guidance. And as one of our participants put it, it's a lot of content and you get lost. So now I would like to switch to the current processes. And to be honest, we saw largely different processes in the interviews we took. This could be down to the company size we interviewed or like the profession that was involved. But we also saw that the process was based on personal experience. And sometimes other constraints also played a role. For example, a bank might need to adhere to banking legislation, so this would then influence their process. But we saw recurring themes. So we saw 4 tasks that reoccurred through almost all of the interviews. We saw the retrieving of assets, so companies would try to get their laptop back. We saw revoking of access rights and removing user accounts, so they tried to somehow limit access to their data and their system. And there was the notification of stakeholders. Then there were also other things that we saw in the interviews, for example, exit interviews or logging and monitoring during the offboarding period and automation, but all of these things were only found in a handful of organizations, so I didn't include them here. So let's switch to challenges and risks. The first challenge was role and permission management. We already saw in the beginning that problems here can lead to drastic consequences, for example, a data breach. And as one of our participants put it, there's a major attack vector here. If access has already been blocked in the system, but the employee's laptop is offline, it's theoretically possible to access local files, even though this should not be possible. So there's a challenge of role and permission management. Then there was the issue of communication. Stakeholders were often not informed about the things they were expected to do. So for example, if your supervisor needs to tell IT about the deactivated user account, but the information is never passed along, of course, they cannot deactivate the account. And this can then in turn lead to disgruntled, or I would say frustrated employees, because like the process is not going as expected, and you probably do not want to have a disgruntled employee in your organization that potentially even got access to old active user accounts. As one participant put it, if you have disgruntled employees that know that he is in danger, they can do a lot of things, that are not ethical. And the last example I brought is missing resources. Missing resources, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, we do not have enough money. But as our participants pointed out, money wasn't always the problem. It could also be down to personnel. So they do not have the personnel to staff a dedicated IT security department or something. And sometimes, even if they got the personnel, they lack like the specific people to be trained in security. And if you got people that do not have the knowledge, you might now decide to train them. But then you might discover that the usability of the frameworks is not that great, so you cannot train your people as effectively. And lastly, it might come down to mindset. As one participant put it, the topic of security and IT security is, I would say, something that hasn't been given much importance in the past. So to sum it up, is there one process to rule them all? We saw the small businesses. We had large enterprises in our interviews. And sadly, no, there probably is not one process to rule them all. We saw the resource mismatch. So the larger enterprises could afford like a dedicated team for security, while in one interview, there was a developer that's doing all of the offboarding and management on the side. Then there's organizational knowledge. The structure and already implemented processes in organization often play a huge role in the decision of what to do in the offboarding and what to do not. And lastly, it's also a bit about risk exposure. Here you have to decide, okay, do I want to spend a lot of money on a dedicated security department, or do I carry the risk of potential settlements in the millions. And with that, I come to our key takeaways. The current practices are inconsistent. We saw a huge difference in a lot of the interviews we led. Then in the frameworks, they lacked actionable guidance and are quite hard to navigate. With lack of knowledge about secure offboarding, gaps in the security can emerge. And offboarding can help to close some of these gaps. Yes. Thank you very much. There is a link to our paper or QR code. And if you got any questions, I would be happy to answer them.